evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick Saban Show, presented by Alpha Insurance. Glad you're with us this evening. We're joined, as we just mentioned, by Chris Lowe of ESPN.com. And we're also, of course, joined by the Bobby Dodd Trophy Coach of the Week honoree, Coach Nick Saban. Congratulations. Nice to see you, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. I didn't realize that. Thank you very much.
You can take a look at the press release. There you go.
I'm fine, thank you. I probably wasn't as pleased as what I'd like to be sometimes. I think sometimes you win the game, but you don't really beat the other team, was what I kind of told our players. Mm-hmm. We played really well the first 20 minutes of the game, and then, just became a pretty ordinary team after that. And that's something, and I think a big lesson is learned that we did that a little bit in the Miami game, but we were playing at a neutral site. But when you do it when you're playing on the road, and then the crowd gets into the game, and then the energy and enthusiasm of the other team starts kicking in, mm-hmm. and then your players start getting a little bit frustrated, which kind of affects their decision-making and ability to be responsible and do their job, so you start making mistakes. And then the result of that is you become pretty ordinary pretty quick. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, in that. I still think we need to learn how to compete for 60 minutes in the game and stay focused on what we need to do to maintain our intensity so that we can play the way we're capable of playing over a longer period of time, which, we've shown signs but haven't sustained it yet.
Yeah. Coach, always great to have Chris in town, isn't it?
Oh, I love Chris. Chris has been great to us through the years. He's been a great friend to the family, and he's really been fair with Alabama through the years, and I really appreciate some of the stuff that he's written and said, and I think he's very objective, and very seldom do I disagree, which I can't say that about many media people.
Wait till you read the story that's coming out tomorrow, Nick.
Maybe I spoke too soon.
You mentioned playing with consistency. 3 games into the season, what do you watch for specifically in practice, Nick, to make sure or give you that idea that you're going to play with more consistency in the next game?
Well, I think we have, and I don't think people realize just how young our team really is. Like we even have a leadership group on our team where we have 10 players. Well, I met with the leadership group today. We only have 2 seniors, in the whole leadership group. So, we have a very young team. And I think that, your team sort of grows in stages of development. Sometimes when we get really young players, they have trouble listening. They want to defend what they did rather than listen to what you have to say to try to correct them. But the only way that they can get the knowledge that they need to be able to play with any kind of consistency is to learn how to listen. Because when they get knowledge, they start to get understanding. When they start to understand what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, why it's important to do it that way, they start to develop wisdom of how you have to play and how you have to compete, and then that usually creates well-being. All of a sudden, I'm playing well and doing things on a consistent basis because I was able to listen and learn and develop knowledge and understanding. And when you have a young team, they're all at a little bit different stage of, that development. And, it's harder for them to be consistent. So I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to work through with this team. And when you have such a young team, you don't have all these older guys. Like we had great leadership on our team last year because we had great seniors. Smitty was a great leader. Landon Dickerson was a great leader. Mm-hmm. And that internal sort of peer pressure that guys can put on other players on the team sort of enhances this development. So we need to continue to grow, as a team. We need a lot of young guys need to keep growing up, and a lot of the older guys need to learn how to actually help them do that.
Coach, obviously you've got to have a set of rules for everybody, but not everybody reacts to the same stimulus. How long does it take you and the assistant coaches to realize which guy needs an arm around the shoulder, which guy needs a kick in the caboose? Because everybody's different.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've done that's been very helpful to all of us as coaches, and especially me, is, we do a lot of mental conditioning for success,
Right.
which includes psychological type evaluations on players. And Dr. Rosen is a psychiatrist who meets with every player, and they give us a lot of insight on how players best would respond, to whether you need to get on them. They're not self-starters. You got to get them going. Whether they're obsessive compulsive and beat themselves up. So if you beat them up, that's even worse for them. So, everybody's got, like you say, a little different way that they respond. Sometimes it takes a while to figure it out, but we try to do it in a way that we get the information as soon as possible so we can help them develop more quickly.
Our phone lines are open if you'd like to join us, 877-202-BAMA. And our first question tonight on the phone is brought to you by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig to know what's below. Pee Wee in Grand Bay, Alabama, as per usual, is up first. Hello, Pee Wee. Good evening.
Pee Wee.
Hello, Pee Wee. Well, apparently Pee Wee is not able to be with us. We'll try and get him back. I'll ask Pee Wee's question. What do you think of the line play this weekend?
Well, I think that's why Pee Wee hung up.
Yeah. He let me do the dirty work.
We got to work on Pee Wee's consistency.
Yeah.
He calls every week and always talks about the offensive line.
No, he does.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you run into things in a game and people and fans don't really realize it, but the other team does something that's totally different than what you prepared for.
Sure.
All right, so for our offensive line, who I think did a pretty decent job in pass protection in the game, and I think did a pretty good job overall, considering the fact that Florida really played a different front than what we prepared for. So we were constantly making adjustments on how we were going to block plays and how we'd get a hat on a hat. So it was a little different, for our players in the game. And I thought that they showed really good resiliency in making those adaptations, but even though we didn't statistically have great big numbers like we sometimes have on offense, we had 2 16-play drives in the second half, and we got a first down when we needed to take the air out of it at the end of the game.
Sure.
So they did what they had to do to win the game. It was a little disappointing when we got 1st and 1 at the 1, and we had to settle for a field goal. But, I'm sure we'll learn from that as well.
Now, Chris, jump on in.
You're talking about the younger players, Nick. Bryce Young last year, we forget, at least I do a lot, that, he, even though he was a backup, he didn't play in front of any crowds.
No,
to go on the road his first start and about as raucous an environment as you're going to have, how do you think he came out of that as his first start on the road like that?
I thought he did a really good job. I mean, it's always challenging when you play on the road. And, noise can have a huge impact on a game. And once they got rolling, that's a tough place to play, and their fans were really into it. And I try to always tell our players, everybody really wants to beat you guys. This is like the game that they circled on the calendar in the summertime that we're all getting ready for. So when you get in these situations and you don't, you got to make the people sit on their hands. And basically, they didn't have a lot to cheer about when it was 21-3. But when they converted to 4th and 6 on a pass interference and then went on down and scored, and they scored and got 21-9, and the place went, bonkers. It was rough after that. But I thought Bryce handled it really well. We had to go silent in the game at times. Mm-hmm. So we were using an abnormal snap count. We had a couple, miscues, but most of it was on the snap count. And I think that's why we had several illegal procedure penalties, and the 4th and 1 at the 1. Inside the 1, actually, when we got a penalty, was one of those situations where the center thought we were in one cadence and everybody else thought we were in another. Mm-hmm. But again, that's sort of a communication issue.
Sure. Let me ask you a question, and this is not, and I'm serious, this is not a follow-up to the last couple of weeks. I'm very serious, but I talk about tight ends. Coach Mullen had not thrown to the tight end in his first couple of games, but then he did repeatedly early on Saturday. How disorienting is that?
Well, it really is not have anything to do with the tight end, all right, because we don't have any defenses where we don't cover the tight end. We cover all the guys that are eligible. Mm-hmm. We cover them different ways. Sometimes we cover man-to-man, and there's a middle-of-the-field safety. Sometimes we play 3-deep zone, and there's a middle-of-the-field safety. Sometimes we play split safeties. Sometimes we play 500-man. But in none of those situations do we not cover the tight end.
Right.
All right, but so they ran 5 times in the game. They ran a play that was a complementary play, which I don't know if I can explain in layman's terms so you would understand it. All right, but the back's over here, the quarterback's here, and they fake the ball to the tailback this way because they have a quarterback who can run. They run quarterback power this way. Okay, so the linebacker's responsibility is to jump over and play the quarterback power, even though the running back's going in this direction. All right, so we've never seen this play before. So they run the same play. This guy's going in this direction. They run a quarterback power. The guard's pulling this way. The linebacker's playing it. And they sneak the tight end, who the linebacker's supposed to be covering, across the field with the back running a wheel route down the sidelines, and we're drained out. Right. 5 times they hit that pass on us in the game. All right, and it was a run-pass conflict, all right, for the linebacker. And it was all instigated by the fact that they have a quarterback who runs, and they have quarterback runs in their offense, and they're throwing play-action passes off of quarterback runs.
Gotcha.
So, as much as you
I was being very serious, though, because I remember they hadn't done that all season, and all of a sudden it came out numerically a good number of times on Saturday.
You mentioned the tight end. With the way the game's played now, Nick, if you're recruiting an inline tight end, heck, a fullback, I mean, does anybody here even know what a fullback is anymore? How do you project those guys in watching tape in high school? Because nobody has them on the field anymore.
Yeah, I think tight end is one of the toughest, most difficult positions to recruit because a tight end is really, in this day and age of football, is really 3 positions in one. All tight ends play wide receiver. You see four guys open all the time, and one of them's a tight end. Then when a tight end's off in the core, I call it, right beside the tackle someplace, he's running slider and lead plays, which is what an I formation fullback used to do. These are the same plays if you were in the I formation, except the tight end is now blocking like the fullback. He's also the guy that goes out for passes on boots and what we call sliders when he goes across the formation, goes out to the other side. And then he lines up in the C area like a tight end like we all used to know by the tackle with his hand in the dirt. So that's really 3 different positions that a tight end has to play. Most of the time when you see a guy in high school, he's usually doing one of those things. Maybe some 6'5", 220-pound kid that's playing wide out. All right, but he really has to be projected as a tight end. But very seldom do you see a guy playing tight end with his hand in the dirt who is athletic enough to be a college tight end. So it really becomes a very difficult position to try to get a guy that can do all 3 of those things. We've had a couple here. Irv was really good at it. O.J. Howard was really good at it. But they developed into it too. O.J. was really a good receiver that developed into being a blocking tight end, got bigger, got stronger, and became a first-round draft pick. But this is a hard position to really recruit, because if you recruit a guy that's a really good blocker who weighs 260 pounds, he can't go out there and play wide out. Right? And so you get a guy like Jaleel Billingsley. We actually use an offensive tackle that played the hand in the dirt tight end quite a bit. And Cameron Latu, who we really recruited as an outside linebacker.
Right.
We moved him to tight end because he had size and athletic ability, and he's become a pretty good tight end, and he can actually do all 3 things. And we didn't even recruit him as a tight end.
Yeah. Coach Nick Saban with us. Of course, Chris Lowe from ESPN.com. I'm Eli Gold. We are coming right back. We've got a whole lot more going on tonight as the Nick Saban Show comes your way, presented by Alpha Insurance. Protect your car's home, life, and business with Alpha. Back in a moment on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. Brian Robinson, the senior from right here in Tuscaloosa, went to Hillcrest High School, and we look forward to seeing him. We'll talk with the coach here in just a moment and discuss everybody and how healthy everyone is. Coach, we just heard the Brian Robinson cut. How's B-Rob doing and the whole bunch? We've seen some good play out of the running backs.
Yeah, they played well. You know, I thought B-Rob played really well in the last game. He got a little banged up, got hit in the ribs a little bit, nothing serious. But and Jace McClellan has played extremely well, played really well in the game. So, you know, hopefully we'll get to play, you know, Trey Sanders and some of the other guys, you know, this week as well, because we need those guys to get some experience.
Coach, we've got questions from the Nick Saban Radio Show blog on AL.com. And Bobby up in Madison, Alabama says, hey, Coach, from what I understand, Southern Miss features a quality running back, a mobile freshman. Should we expect to see option football against us on Saturday? Is that what they tend to run? Thank you, and roll Tide.
Right. Well, they do have some quarterback runs in their offense. They haven't run a whole lot of options, but it would not surprise me if we saw options, and we have worked on options this week with the quarterback. You know, the quarterback is a freshman. He's a very athletic guy. Their regular quarterback got injured about halfway through the second game. He was a little older, a little more experienced, but the same kind of athletic kind of guy. So they do have a good running back. Frank Gore's son is quick, explosive, can run behind his pads, does a really good job. But I do think one of the things that people probably overlook about Southern Miss is they have, like, they're second in the nation in rushing defense, and they're like 12th overall in total defense and scoring defense. They have a very good defensive team for, you know, their level of play, and I would equate their defense to, you know, an SEC type defense in terms of the way they played so far this year. So this is going to be an important game that we do a good job on offense, but it's also really important that we play, you know, much better on defense.
43.7 yards per game on the ground is what they have allowed, and just 248 in total. A great tribute to you this week from Southern Miss's head coach Will Hall. He said he was at the University of West Alabama at Livingston when you first came to Alabama. And he said, Coach Saban really didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. He said, but I called, I asked for permission to just hang around, to be in the building, to talk, to watch practice, and so on and so forth. And he said, you were so accommodating. And he said, you know, obviously there are differences in our programs, financial and so on. He said, but I try to run my program exactly the way Coach Saban does. He said he was such a nice man to allow me to just sit in and follow and learn from him, even though we didn't ever work together.
Well, I always had a lot of respect for Will, and he certainly did a great job at Tulane when he was the offensive coordinator there, and I'm sure he's doing a really good job at Southern Miss. He's a new head coach there. But, you know, one of the things that I've always tried to do is some people are very paranoid in coaching about letting other people, you know, come in and visit and talk and, you know, learn. But I learned everything that I know in this profession. Everything, there's not one thing that I invented. I learned from somebody else, giving me the opportunity to be able to come and visit them and spend time and be willing to share information. So I've never ever had that attitude that sharing information and helping people grow professionally, and even young coaches that come in and, you know, grow professionally is really positive for the profession and not something that really ever is worth being paranoid about.
I hear you. Chris, jump on in, sir.
Well, you know, speaking of people in the profession who helped you, all right, What was Don James' secret weapon in talking you into coaching and not going to grad school? Remember his secret weapon?
Yeah, Miss Terry had another year of school. That was it. That was it. I mean, I've told this story probably 100 times before, so I don't want to bore anybody with it. So, I was playing baseball my senior year. We just got beat in the Tangerine Bowl by Freddie Solomon. Some of you remember what a great quarterback he was. And it was like a one-point game, like, 24-23 or 21-20 or something. And so I was getting ready to come back, start January, school again, start baseball practice very soon after that. And Coach James calls me in and, says, I want you to be a graduate assistant. And I said, I don't know why I'd want to be a graduate assistant. I don't want to be a coach, and I don't want to go to graduate school.
Other than that, though, yeah.
So he said, well, you can't take a job anywhere. You can't do anything because, Miss Terry's got another year of school, and you promised your mom, her mom and your parents both that you'd both graduate before you did anything. And I said, yeah. He said, so you might as well just do it for 1 year. I said, okay, I'll do it for 1 year.
And here we are decades later. Yeah.
That was 1973.
That's a great story. Coach, let's talk about this question that comes from Harris in Atlanta. Another question from your Nick Saban radio show blog. It really has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but he's curious how you feel about the 4-game limit for redshirting.
The 4-game limit for redshirting. I think that's, I guess you got to put it in perspective. We used to not play a guy at all.
Yeah.
And we couldn't redshirt him unless he played a limited number of games, which I think was like 20 or 25% of the season, and was injured and could not continue to play the rest of the season, or not play at all. Those are the only two ways you could redshirt a guy. And I think, a lot of us sort of campaigned for this rule because we wanted to be able to play some young players in games where they had an opportunity to enhance their development, but they may not be far enough up the depth chart to be playing in, every game of the season or even half the games of the season. So to be able to play a guy for 4 games and still redshirt him, I think is a really positive thing for young players' development. Like we can play freshmen in maybe the Mercer game, but that doesn't really necessarily mean that they won't be able to get redshirted.
Exactly.
And we may have several more opportunities to do that. So I think it's a really good rule. I've never thought about having a rule that maybe would even allow them to play more than that and still get redshirted. I don't know. But the thing about it is we don't have a lot of, I just talked earlier about how many seniors we have on our team. Mm-hmm. We only have 2 fifth-year seniors on our team, the whole team. So redshirting guys is, guys graduate in 3.5 years. I mean, we graduate probably 80% of our guys in 3.5 years. All right, so they don't really want to hang around, and unless they want to get a master's degree. And then so many guys could get drafted, so they'd rather get drafted and go try to play in the NFL. So we don't end up with a lot of 50-year guys, which I actually wish we had more because I do think it helps the maturity of your team.
Definitely. Coach, right here to your right, we have a visitor here at Bob Baumhauer's with a question. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Hi, Coach.
How are you?
Being that you're preparing for Southern Miss this weekend, what do you think they're well at?
What do you think they're what?
Do they perform well at? What are you expecting from them?
Well, I think they'll play very well against us. I think they have a very athletic quarterback. I think they have good skill guys on offense. And I think they play really, really well on defense. So I have a lot of respect for the team. I have a lot of respect for their coach. And I think they've got some really good players. I think they've had some inconsistencies in their first couple games. They could have probably won all 3 of the games that they've played. And they're 1-2, but I think they played well enough to win in 2 games that they lost.
Indeed. Ma'am, thank you very much. We're going to come right back. More from the coach, more from ESPN.com's Chris Lowe. But right now we break for these on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. As we welcome you back to the Nick Saban Show, this segment of the show is presented by Royal Furniture. Family owned and operated for 75 years, Royal Furniture has locations in Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Memphis, and Jackson, Tennessee for your shopping convenience. Let's go to the phones. Chris is joining us from Loxley, Alabama. Hello, Chris. Good evening. Well, they're having some issues with the phones back at the studio, so we'll keep it right here, Chris, and why don't you jump in?
Nick, I think that Florida game was the first time since 11 since you guys have played down there in Gainesville. And I think with OU and Texas coming to the league at some point, we're certainly going to see more games in the SEC, something I know you've long been a proponent for. How much more representative of the league do you think it will be when you play more teams more often than in some cases, maybe 8, 9, 10 years?
Well, I've always been a proponent of every player in your program being able to play every team in the SEC in their career, which means in 3 or 4 years you would play every team.
Right.
And, right now the way it's set up in the last few years, since we expanded, we play the teams in the East about once every 6 or 7 years. Mm-hmm. So players really don't get the opportunity to play, the teams on the other side. And the only way you can do it is, either play more games, or we talked about this last week, having, 4-team divisions, which
Right.
means you'd only have 3 fixed games and you'd rotate playing the other teams a lot more. And I think the fans would like that. I think the fans probably liked last season when we played 10 SEC games. And me personally, I'd rather play more SEC games. I don't know that would be advantageous to the SEC because we're probably the strongest, deepest conference. I mean, all you got to do is look at the top 25 and see how many of those teams we're going to play this year and how many teams are in the top 25. So when you add more teams that are going to be in the top 25 in your league, then you're playing each other. Well, other conferences are not playing the same quality of schedule. And how you balance that out, I'm not sure, but I know the fans would love it. I know the players would love it to be able to play in those kind of competitive games. I think, players come to a place like Alabama to play games at Florida. They come to play, in big games. And we've had a lot of big games here that our players really enjoy. And, obviously if you play them well enough, you're not going to win them all, but it certainly helps you grow and develop when you win, and it helps you grow and develop and learn when you lose. So all those things I think are important in your development.
Chris, what are you hearing as you travel about Texas and Oklahoma? Not even talking about the business end of it, just the competition. Are folks across the country understanding? Are they ticked off? What are you hearing?
Well, first off, Eli, I think you're going to see those two teams in the SEC sooner as opposed to later. I think 25 now contractually is when they're supposed to get out. I think it's going to be earlier than that. I think they'll pay whatever fee they need to pay to get out, and I think you'll see them in maybe as early as 23. What are folks saying? It just, Nick was telling me, it makes the SEC and already the strongest league in the country that much stronger. You've got 2 big brands, 2 national brands who've won championships. I mean, Oklahoma's been in the playoff just about every year the last 4 or 5 years. I think it's going to make it harder if you're in the SEC. But again, I think you're bringing 2 football-centric schools into a league that's about as football-centric as it gets.
Yeah. And, Coach, that's the bottom line right there. The fans are going to love it.
Oh, I think it'll be great. I mean, I think it's great for the league. I think it's going to be great for the players. The competition will be great. But I coached in the NFL for 8 years, so you didn't play any bad teams. All you played was NFL teams, and they were all good, and they were all capable of beating you on any given Sunday. And the whole league was set up for parity.
Yeah.
If you won more games, you played a more difficult schedule. If you won more games, you drafted later. Right. The bad teams got the draft first. All right, so the whole league was set up for parity. If they could have a perfect season in the NFL, everybody would go 8-8, so everybody would be interested in going to see their team play. Mm-hmm. College football is not sort of geared that way, and I think it's not good that we have everybody interested in who are going to be the 4 teams in the playoff rather than interested in all 120-some teams or however many we have in Division I, or at least all the teams that are in Power 5 conferences. So I think the more we can play each other, the more it creates that kind of a scenario.
I don't know if you had any time at all to see what Urban Meyer said yesterday. They were talking about the NFL, and he goes, goodness, he goes, every week it's like playing Alabama. And he was hearkening back to his collegiate days. Again, a nice tip of the helmet to you.
Well, not just to me. I mean, that's to the University of Alabama and all
Sure.
the people who've made the tradition what it is here, from Coach Bryant to Coach Stallings to Coach Perkins and everybody that's been here for a long, long time. So, but I said this before, your character is much easier to keep than it is to give away and try to get back. And I'm talking about the tradition that we have here, the things and the culture that we've created in terms of being a team that is well respected and maybe even in some ways, feared because of the way they compete, the toughness they play with, the intensity they play with, how they can finish. That does something that when you play in the league, you want the other teams in your league to have that thought about you. Mm-hmm. Well, you got to keep that. You can't give it away. And every team has to buy into that culture. And that's one of the things that I'm really trying to get this team to really buy into. I don't want the other team to say, hey, we were the more physical team. Hey, we were the tougher team. They didn't really beat us. I mean, that's not how it's been, and that's not what we want it to be.
Exactly.
And but we have to mature our way into that through learning lessons, like we learned at Florida, and hopefully we'll see how we respond and grow to those things. But talented players, like I always say, talent really isn't talent if you can't use it. And you can only use it if it's disciplined and the people will behave and do the things that they need to do to be the best that they possibly can be. And, that always starts with your intangibles. Your intangibles are willing to give effort, play with toughness, and know and be responsible for what you're supposed to do and what your job is. Those 3 things take no ability. None at all. Doesn't take any ability to give effort, doesn't take any ability to finish plays, doesn't take any ability to play with toughness. That's not something that's God-given, that's something that you choose. And it doesn't take any ability to be conscientious and responsible to do your job and be able to do it whatever the circumstance is. Don't get frustrated, don't get emotional. I've talked about this before, man. Our guys get emotional. They got, like, the penalties. I mean, we got too many penalties because we got bad decisions. We got bad decisions because we're emotional or we're frustrated. So all these things are, competitive maturity and character that we got to continue to develop on our team.
Coach, directly in front of us, we've got a gentleman with a question. Good evening.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, the past few years of wide receivers have been unbelievable. Who do you think are some of the guys that can continue that trend for the future of, first-round talent?
Right. Well, we have been really, really blessed here to have, I think, 7 first-round draft picks, since 2010, starting with Julio Jones and Amari Cooper and, you know them all. I don't have to name them. And we've had 4 in the last 2 years that were electrifying. And, that makes a huge difference when you have those kinds of guys that the other team really can't match up with. And we have a few guys on our team this year. I think Demo Williams has a chance to be that kind of player. I think Mechie can be that kind of player. I think JoJo Earl can be that kind of player who's just a freshman. We have a couple other freshmen who really have ability, but they're in this category of, we've got to develop the right sort of competitive character to be able to go out there and be responsible to do our job on a consistent basis. So we do have some players, and I think that we need to get them in spots where they can make plays. And I think it's going to be important that we can create more explosive plays as we have in the past because of some of the players that we had, but also, the positions that we put them in so they could make plays and they were mismatched players. So I think we need to do a better job of that as well.
Coach, Pee Wee is never going to be deterred. He has texted me his question since he can't get through on the phone. He says when things collapse around Bryce and he has to break out and do something, he does a really good job looking downfield. But there seem times that there's been an opening where he could have gotten a first down or even a touchdown, but he opted to throw the ball instead. Is that a personal decision that he makes at that time? Are those directions you give him during the week of practice? Is that done by design?
No, I don't think that it's done by design. We don't tell the guy not to run. We don't tell him not to run and get a first down.
Right.
We don't tell him not to when he bootlegs out, and he might have been able to score a touchdown if he decided to run rather than throw the ball. I think, we don't have a third base coach, all right, in football that tells the batter to take, bunt, or steal every
Sure.
play, okay? I mean, some of these things are instinctive.
Yeah, you just got to do it.
All right, you come out there, you're a good passer, you think you can get the ball in there, you throw the ball, you're looking to pass first, you're not looking to run first, so you make that decision. And then after the fact, we can all sit around and say, well, he should have ran. But if the pass would have been completed, nobody would say,
Diddly.
nobody would say anything. It'd be fine. All right, the only reason there's any question is it was incomplete.
Yeah.
All right, so, but we don't have a third base coach saying, run,
Exactly.
pass,
Yeah.
no, giddy up, no, whoa. We don't have that.
I hear ya. Pee-wee, thank you for your text, sir. We're coming right back. We've got more with the coach right after this on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. Two-point conversion try. The running back, and he'll get to the one, and he is stopped. He is stopped. Alabama holds on the two-point conversion. Justin Eboigbe and Will Anderson stop the Gators on a two-point conversion at the 2-yard line. A huge play to cement the win for the Crimson Tide as we welcome you back. This segment of the Nick Saban Show is sponsored by Coke Zero Sugar. New look, improved taste, new Coke Zero Sugar. Eli Gold with Chris Lowe of ESPN.com and Coach Saban. Chris, jump on in, sir.
I'm listening to that clip of Will Anderson. How many times do you see a kid come in with that maturity, that work ethic, ability? I was watching him today in practice. His wingspan is incredible for an edge rusher and a linebacker. But just to have that, not only physical, but all the other intangibles.
Well, I tell you, he's, I don't ever think there's a perfect player. But when it comes to character and competitive attitude and setting a good example every day for his teammates, work ethic, played hurt in the last game, didn't practice a couple days. And, he went out there and played, and a lot of guys probably wouldn't have. And he ended up being the player of the week. He had more production points than anybody, and he wasn't 100%. But, I think a lot of college players, really make the mistake of thinking that I can only play if I'm 100%. But pro players think just the opposite. When I was in pro ball, guys would play, when they were hurt and injured and banged up because they didn't want anybody to take their job. So they had a whole different mentality about, how they would manage, through and play in difficult situations. But I'm telling this because Will was going to play no matter what, because he wanted to play for his team. He's a competitor. He doesn't care about that stuff. That doesn't even bother him at all. But I can't tell you the number of players that come in and they're anxious and they're nervous and they're saying, I don't know if I can play. I'm not 100%. And I said, nobody in the NFL is 100%. They're playing 16 games. They play 4 exhibition games. They get in the playoffs. I said, if you can't play when you're not 100%?
Yeah.
Now nobody wants you to play when you're hurt, injured. But so it's a different mentality. But I'm only telling this because there was never a question about that guy playing in the game. There was never a question about how he felt about what he wanted to do for his team and for his teammates. And I think that he can be a tremendous leader on our team. Because, you've heard me say this 100 times before. A leader, the first thing a leader has to do He has to buy into everything in the organization and do it himself. If he's not going to set a good example and do everything he's supposed to do, how can he tell anybody else to do things right? And Will certainly does that and sets a great example for everybody, and I think he's going to be a great leader on our team, and he's a great player.
And seeing him leave the field at the end of the night, hot and humid, he needed help to get to the locker room. You knew he had everything was left on the field.
Everything. That guy is the ultimate competitor. He's a warrior, what I call a warrior, and that's, for me, that's a tremendous compliment to a guy.
Coach, the clock on the wall says it is time for your final word this evening, presented as always by Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
I don't know how many people saw this week, but there was somebody sent it to me. It was Deion Sanders, and he was talking to his team. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about spirit. He was talking about passion. He was talking about people going out to practice every day and have a sense of purpose in terms of what they wanted to do, what they wanted to accomplish, not just looking at the clock and saying, we got 4 periods left in practice today, what can I do to get through this? Because you have a sense of purpose and you want to be the best and you want to try to do the best. That you can do every opportunity that you get, and you condition yourself to do these things in practice. So many people now want to save themselves. They think they're going to save themselves in playing the game, and that's going to make them play better because they didn't practice hard all week, but they're going to be fresh for the game. Well, if you don't practice hard and condition yourself to grind, because the game is a grind. You have to grind through a game. Well, if you don't practice that way and grind through practice, how do you ever develop the right habits or be able to make good focused decisions when you get tired and when you have to grind through the game? So I love that video. I hope everybody, I sent it to all the players, because you have to develop the right habits in practice in what you do. And it's got to be difficult, and you've got to get yourself to grind through it. But the spirit and passion thing, I don't want to be negative. I'm not trying to be negative with anybody. But, we cannot take for granted that we're always just going to have a good team. And Ohio State's coach said it this week about his team. Just because you put an Ohio State uniform on doesn't mean you're going to go beat the other team. There's certain things that you have to do as a competitor and as a player to be a good player and to be able to dominate the competition, and we have tremendous competition in our league. But there's also a spirit and a passion that people who support the program and people who come to the games provide a spirit and a passion that affects the players, and we just live through that in Florida. So I don't want anybody to ever say that it's harder to play someplace else than it is to play here. And let's just get some practice on what we got to do to fill the stadium, have some spirit and passion for our team. We don't have a perfect team right now. We're a growing and developing team, so that we can get where we want to go. I'd appreciate that from everybody if we could do that. And I'll do the best I can to get these guys to grow and develop and do their part. But let's everybody be a part of the team. We've always been that way.
Yep, we're all in this together. Coach, thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Chris Lowe, thank you. Great to see and have you with us. Hey, folks, let's remind you about this weekend before we take another break. Don't forget to download your tickets at home. Arrive early and download your tickets at home before you come to the stadium. That's going to save everybody a good bit of time trying to get in. Check your tickets. Be aware through which gate you're supposed to enter the stadium, because your ticket will only be able to be scanned at that designated gate. So again, when the Tide returns home on Saturday, arrive early. The gates will be open 2.5 hours prior to the 6:30 kickoff. Download your tickets at home. Save yourself a lot of time, save yourself a lot of hassles, and make sure you know which gate to enter the stadium, and you'll have a wonderful time with no problems.